From the KIRO Radio newsroom in Seattle, I'm Dave Ross, and these are the Ross Files. What kinds of technologies do kids find creepy, and why would that question even come up? We have a couple of researchers from the University of Washington Information School. Alexis Hiniker teaches at the Information School as an assistant professor, and Jason Yip is an assistant professor of digital youth. And I guess this began with you, Jason. You're working with the kids all the time to design things?
Yeah, so we have a group called Kids Team UW. It's what we call an intergenerational co-design group, and that's just a complicated way of saying kids come after school, and they design new technologies for other children. So we basically work with them. I have a group of volunteers, volunteer graduate and undergraduate students, and we work with the same kids.
Designing what?
We've designed mobile apps, games, technologies for health. We also
So stuff that might show up on my smartphone.
Yeah, we've done work with Microsoft. We've done work with Amazon. We've done work with Google. We've done a lot of things as well with our own projects at the University of Washington.
And kids were saying from time to time that some of the stuff that you had them work on was creepy?
Yeah. So one of the things we had done was we were trying to build a sleep tracker. When we first tried to do this project, we had kids look at a whole bunch of technologies, and one of the trackers was underneath your bed, right? So the children would sleep underneath your bed, and then the tracker would be there. And I thought, okay, what do y'all think about this tracker? And they're like, ew, no, we don't want that. It's creepy. And I was like, why? It's just under your bed. And they're like, yeah, that's the problem. It's under your bed. Things should not be monitoring under. And so that was one of the first thoughts. Was that's very interesting. I've never seen that before.
So Alexis, how did you get involved?
Well, let's see. Jason and I were doing a project together on designing smart objects for families' meals. So could you have a plate that knows what's on it, or a cup that knows how full it is, and things like that. So we worked with Kids Team for a couple of sessions, and they came up with just a huge array of different designs for that context, including things that would follow you around and things that would kind of notice your patterns and cook for you and stuff like that. And occasionally they'd kind of comment on each other's designs, calling them creepy. I don't want to use that. Why are you making creepy stuff? And I remember asking Jason, what do you think they mean when they say something is creepy? And he was like, yeah, I'm not sure that we really know that in a precise way. And so we kind of ran with it from there. Yeah.
And you got 11 kids. How'd you chose the kids from the team that works with you, Jason?
Yeah, so these kids have worked with me from at minimum about 1 year, at maximum to almost 4 years. So I've had a really strong relationship.
And so they're already pretty tech savvy then.
They're pretty tech savvy. And one of the things that's actually also very interesting is that they also know how to talk about it. So instead of just interviewing a whole bunch of kids, we could go ahead and try to interview 100, 200 children about creepy, but it would be very shallow. We wouldn't really be able to get a lot of data from it. But instead, we went really in depth with these 11 children over time, trying to ask, with 4 sessions, trying to work with them. And basically, we learned a lot from each of those sessions as we moved along and sort of adjusted and thought about what that word meant.
So did you find a common thread among these 11 kids as to what would really trigger the creepiness feeling?
Yeah, for sure. We found a number of themes that showed up again and again. And, on the surface, sometimes their reactions were different. So it's not that every child had the same reaction to every technology. There were different things that hit on different buttons for them. But overall, we saw that the same kinds of fears came up again and again. And the one that I found most interesting was how often kids would talk about technologies as being creepy if they saw some path to that particular technology getting in the way of their relationship with someone that they care about. So technologies become creepy if they mimic the child and make parents think that the technology is a replacement child, or a technology is creepy
really?
If it can trick you into thinking that your mom said something that she didn't.
So it's too real? I mean, is this...
It's too real, but it's too real in this very specific, intrusive way where it's getting in the way of an important attachment relationship for the child.
But I mean, is this an indication that artificial intelligence, for example, could go too far by learning too much about the child and being too much like a parent or a friend?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the perception of that. One of our kids was saying things like, it's okay if my friends and family laugh at my jokes. I think that's totally fine. That's actually what jokes are meant to do. But if all of a sudden like I said something and my voice assistant started to laugh at it, like then there's something very ambiguous, very uncertain. Like I don't know, and one of the things we learned a lot much more about this creepy word is that, all the things that Alexis was talking about, the sort of mimicry, deception, unpredictability, how it looks and feels, and also just lack of control, all kind of goes to like this unknown. And so with AI, that's one of our biggest questions. Like, how do families talk about artificial intelligence?
That's
Yeah,
interesting because your name is Alexis.
Yeah,
And
don't get me started on that.
So, and
I've stopped replying to emails where someone calls me Alexa.
I know, but I mean that's essentially what these assistants are designed to do, is to be that kind of companion, right?
Yeah, that's right. To be conversational.
And the kids don't like it.
I wouldn't say that they don't like it, but there are certain patterns of technology use where it can raise this ambiguous possibility for them that perhaps it starts to interfere with their relationship. So kids would say things like, I don't want my parents to have a robot that seems too real, because they might start to love it more than me. Things like that.
Really?
Yeah. That was surprising to us.
Yeah.
The fact that, like, wait, do you really think that, like, your parents are going to choose a robot over you? And they're like,
right.
Maybe, like, these
if
things are getting
too real.
If it gets too real. Or the other opposite end was when I can't tell the difference between a robot and my parent, or a robot's voice. I mean,
Yeah.
we're starting to see, voice assistants and others who are mimicking the actual voice of politicians or famous
Right.
people.
Well, that's a real possibility. You could get a phone call from someone who sounds like your parent but
right,
isn't.
and it's all synthesized.
Yeah.
And that was a very creepy possibility to them. We saw the kids actually were kind of drawn to and liked mimicry when it was of animals or pets or animal-like things. So it wasn't so much that they didn't like when it was realistic. It was like that they didn't like when it was realistic in this very specific context.
So it sounds like there's a line here that you've discovered. I mean, it's a small sample, 11 kids, but it sounds like these were as young as 7, right?
Yeah, as young as 7 years
Okay,
old.
so even at that age, there's a line they seem to be drawing here, which is, don't try to trick me that this is an actual thinking, feeling being. It's just a computer.
Even though, like, we knew that they would probably say things about harm, physical harm, like, oh, I'm worried that these technologies will invite strangers into my home to harm me, or invite, or the technology itself would physically hurt me. That wasn't surprising to us. But what was as Alexis said, the disruption of the relationship between adult and child, or parent and child, in this way. And that's the question that we all have now. Like, okay, so what is it that's going to be disruptive? What is it that the children perceive or don't know? And that's where they don't use words like scary, like, oh, the technology is scary and it's going to hurt me. They use words like creepy, like, there's something not right. There's something unsettling about this.
Gradually working its way into
They're worried about where this information will end up, that they're giving it?
They do worry about that. They worried a little bit about the lack of control. Like, they couldn't like many adults, like, they kind of worried about the flow of information. One of our kids was saying that, like, with something that monitors, like, maybe toothbrush, or like brushing, like, now we have Internet of Things toothbrushes.
That's right.
They were like, oh my gosh, what if this thing were to tell my parents stop feeding me candy?
That's right.
Like, and she said, like, this is my worst nightmare. The fact that, like, it's not just one thing. It's kind of the sort of, like, pervasiveness of
Somebody
all
would
of
know
this.
every single thing you ever ate.
Yeah, something like that, right?
But
And
you guys are busy inventing this stuff, so why are you inventing it?
that's a good question. So one of the things is I actually kind of, like, want to push back on some of those inventions. We did this study so that we could actually kind of have a checklist to see, like, wait a sec, is this the right thing to really think about? Like, these are things, like, it's just one more thing in the world that we have to consider as possibly having these sort of, like, subversive goals, or the sort of uncertainty. So it was almost like a check for us as researchers, but also a check for designers, or even a way for parents to talk about these kind of things.
But I also think it's important not to kind of overreact. Like, this is a specific investigation into one way in which technology can be problematic. But that certainly isn't to say that kind of all up technology isn't a good idea, or we shouldn't pursue any of these design paths. It's just that we really want a nuanced understanding of what is valuable about these experiences and what is problematic about these experiences, and how can we guide designers to create products that kind of hit on the things that customers and kids and other stakeholders value without undermining what matters to them.
I find it reassuring, though, that even kids as young as 7 have this concern that technology could go too far, especially when it comes to mimicking a human. But I wonder about the next generation, which will grow up having these things from the get-go.
Well, we saw a lot of what we thought of as both false positives and false negatives. So kids were worried about stuff that, probably they don't really need to be scared of. They were worried about Amazon Echo killing them in their sleep and things like that. But then,
Really?
Yeah.
How did that come up?
Oh, well, there was this wonderful quote that we included in the paper where we were talking to one of the kids, and he was saying that he found the Amazon Echo really creepy. And Jason was like, why? And he was like, because when I ask it something like, can you call Jan Smith? It'll say, calling Jan Smith. And when I ask it something like, are you going to kill me in my sleep? It says, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. So he really highlighted some of
So he thought that she was withholding a secret plan of some kind.
Something like that. And that's that sort of ambiguity and uncertainty that we're talking about. We did another piece of work with these voice assistants, and these sort of like neutral statements are actually not helpful. And it's hard to predict what kind of questions kids will ask. I mean, it's certainly like you could ask a million different questions to these devices. And and have and the I don't knows may fit or not fit in this case, but some of the things that we as designers have to think a lot about is that maybe we have to consider how these neutral answers, intentional or unintentional, actually come out.
Jason's exactly right, because it really highlighted this ambiguity that was causing this sense of creepiness. So if you want to kind of double down on a feeling of ambiguity, then offer that kind of uncertain response.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, there is an inherent deception here, because computers don't talk. They don't know how to talk. They don't know what talking is. They don't know what emotions are. You're basically creating an imitation of talking based on ones and zeros. So maybe instead of, having a human voice say, I don't know, create a beep, which indicates I'm a computer and I'm confused.
Yeah, I like that. Let's bring it back to the kids. See what they say.
I think that's right. The idea of the I don't knows aren't as helpful as we think. And that's kind of why we made this study, so that designers could look and see do our products have these features? Are people going to interpret it in these ways? So creepiness can be broken down into our 5 themes, as opposed to just saying it's creepy. That's not as helpful when it's uncertain. But if we can show you that there are these aspects to it, do our products have these aspects, right? And if so, then maybe we need to consider, bringing kids along first to try it out and asking directly or working with them directly on addressing those themes.
So what's your next non-creepy invention going to be?
We're thinking a lot about AI literacy for families. That's one of our biggest questions right now.
So what would that look like? Is this another desktop thing that learns by listening to your conversations and does things like schedule events, or just talking about turning the lights on and off? What are we talking about?
I think that some of the things we're talking about is actually showing some of what's under the hood, in either coding tools, or even being able to define what AI means. So part of it is the building of the product itself. It could be things like coding and building ways to teach computers to do things, and that helping them understand what it means as a computer progresses through learning. Oh, does that mean that there are things in my own life that also do the same thing, right? So at least dispelling some of the myths of what AI is, this Terminator / Skynet sort of view of it.
Worried that it might eventually become sentient and start making decisions on its own?
Yeah, but also learning how to not just build the technology up, but also building the activities for families. And I think that's the second part that I think gets discredited quite a bit. We think a lot about the artifact, but I think both Alexis and I think a lot about the actual things that happen, with the families in this case.
Yeah. Do you understand what's going on when you set up a neural network and it learns something? From what I hear, the programming is now going from strictly rule-based to setting up a neural network and then loading in data, and the computer figures it out, but no one really knows what it's thinking or what the inner workings are. And I'm just curious if you have any concerns about not being able, when you use a system like that, not being able to debug it if it starts coming to a wrong decision unpredictably.
That's a really long question.
Yes, it
is. I'm trying to think about that. And I think about that in a family sense. I don't know what you think, Alexis.
I mean, there are, so many different things that people mean when they say machine learning or artificial intelligence. And there's certainly, lightweight classifiers that will make it really easy for you to see exactly which features went into the model and how those are weighted. And then there are others where it's much harder for that to be transparent. And I think that's a really hard, broader question that kind of the information field and all the people who build on that are just wrestling with broadly. And obviously that's created lots of challenges around policy in addition to questions around design and implementation.
Yeah. But also if we think about it, like everything you just said, like how do we actually distill it for even children and families to understand? I think that's the bigger question in the next 5 years as well. Like, how do we actually explain what a neural network is and what it is that kids are going to encounter, or what it is that's shifting or changing, or for children to understand even what is changing. The hardware may stay the same, but something's going on behind in the back end in the software in that sense. So,
and in terms of explainability, there was a paper that came out recently that I really liked, where they found that what users really value when they say they want transparency and they want explainability is less about a deep technical understanding of what's happening and more about clear explanations of the motives behind it. So who's behind the system and what do they want out of it? And if you can make that transparent for people, I think you really go a long way towards serving those values.
Alexis Hiniker and Jason Yip, who work at the Information School at the UW.
Remember that when there's a longer version of the interviews on Seattle's Morning News, you can usually find it right here in the original form, unconstrained by the limitations of a live broadcast. And you can subscribe so that when someone says, "Did you hear what was on Seattle's Morning News?" you can say, "Not only that, I heard the part that wasn't on Seattle's Morning News." So my advice is to subscribe. And then when we talk to an author, a politician, an entrepreneur, an artist, a scientist, a teacher, a journalist, a celebrity, you'll hear every word. I'm Dave Ross. Thanks for tuning in.